It was the Overton and Hall show against Will Wade and the Wolfpack. Welcome into this edition of the Barn Hoops podcast. As always, I am your host, Jacob Hillman. And today, we recap last night's Auburn basketball victory over NC State, 83-73. Really kind of a fun game to be at and a back-and-forth affair between the Tigers and the Wolfpack as Auburn gets a huge performance from both Kevin Overton and Keyshawn Hall. Tigers a little bit sloppy with the basketball. We'll talk about that right here on the Barn Podcast Network. Thank you for tuning in, as always, and be sure you're subscribed. You hit the like button on YouTube as well as wherever you listen to your podcast, as we've got a long season ahead as the Tigers continue to improve, continue to show out against high major opponents, and move down the road against some of the best teams in the country. Some major games coming up. We'll preview the next one towards the end of today's episode, but also Auburn football has hired Alex Golesh as its head coach, and early signing day was yesterday. So tons to talk about there right here on the Barn Podcast Network. So make sure you're tuned in for all of the content being pushed out over the next few weeks. But today we focus on the hardwood and Auburn basketball and that 83-73 win, the clinching win in the ACC-SEC Challenge as the Tigers moved to 2-1. And the Challenge lost to Duke last year, defeated Virginia Tech back in 2023. So 2-0 at home in the ACC-SEC Challenge as the Tigers got the new look Wolfpack with first-year head coach Will Wade and tons of transfers like Darion Williams, who won ACC Preseason Player of the Year, as well as a couple of guys that the Tigers have seen before in Ben Allen Lubin, as well as Trey Holloman. All of these guys are familiar with Auburn, and Auburn is familiar with them. And really tonight, it was for Auburn, and Quadir Copeland is the guy that really stood out to me for NC State. But we'll kind of get to the defense later on in this episode. But when you're talking about Auburn, Kevin Overton, a career high 29 points on 8 of 13 shooting, and he was red hot from deep. 6 of 9 from three-point range, and a lot of those threes were from NBA range. It was a really impressive showing. And while I don't think it was necessarily the offense that Coach Stephen Pearl and Coach Mike Burgermaster wanted to see out of their offense, it worked. And it was really impressive to see these guys kind of shot make and play make and find their way to put the ball in the hoop. And it was the same deal with Keyshawn Hall, who was 9 of 14 from the field with 5 threes on 7 shots, and he was 5 of 5 from the line. What was going into this game, NC State had one of the worst defensive free throw rates in the country. It allowed more free throws than just about anybody in the nation. And while Auburn got to the line 22 times and was 19 of 22 from there, so another good showing from the charity stripe. It seems to be kind of an inconsistent deal for Auburn. Some games are going to be better than others, and hopefully it's good in games that Auburn really needs it. And tonight was one of those nights because if Auburn misses 5 more free throws, that game's a lot tighter down the stretch, and you never know how that ends up. But tonight or last night, it was an impressive showing at the free throw line. And, the two guys that we were just talking about, Overton and Hall, were both perfect, 7 of 7 and 5 of 5, so combined 12 from the free throw line. But it was just a heck of a performance. Hall gets a double-double with 10 rebounds as well. Overton was just 1 rebound shy of a double-double. So he's 29 and 9. But these are the first teammates since Jared Harper and Bryce Brown to score 25-plus points in a game. And those two guys did it in the Maui Invitational against Xavier back in 2018. Obviously, that season resulted in a Final Four, with those two guys being the most explosive players on the offensive end of the floor. Chuma Okeke, of course, was a catalyst there as well, but more of an all-around player there. And, yeah, while this offense really flowed through Kevin Overton and Keyshawn Hall last night, it was still important. Like Sebastian Williams-Adams, he scores 7 points, and he's 3 of 3 from the field. He's the third leading scorer on this team. We're going to get to Tahaad Pettiford a little bit later, and kind of what we've talked about. The home and away thing is real. I don't understand it. Stephen Pearl had a funny quote in the post game that I'll read off, and we'll talk about what the difference could be for Pettiford in these home games versus these games away from home, whether it's a road game or a neutral site. But I mean, when you're getting these performances from Overton and Hall, when Pettiford and Murphy and Freeman aren't quite up to their standards, you feel really good about this team moving forward, that guys are going to step up when necessary, because you're not going to need, you're probably going to need Hall to be this kind of guy. You're probably going to need him to be the leading scorer in the SEC, quite frankly, and he's looking like he's going to be in contention for that. But besides that, sure, Tahaad's not going to have 20-plus points every night. Neither is Murphy. Neither is Freeman. Nor is Sebastian Williams-Adams or whoever else. And Kevin Overton's not as well. But when one of those guys steps up, and it doesn't have to be a 29-point performance every single time, it's still something to really build off of. And all right, great job, Overton. Let's look at Arizona. Is it Tahaad's turn? Does Elyjah Freeman have a big game? Hopefully, a lot of those guys can have a big game, because that's what it's going to take down the second-ranked Wildcats. But regardless, you're not every night going to get all 7-8 guys in the rotation just scoring at will. Some guys are going to be a little bit slower. It's good to see that, when things are tough, that you can have two guys and or someone to rely on to really step it up. And that kind of moves to the next point of the 20 turnovers in this game. Can't happen. Cannot happen on Saturday. Can't happen against Purdue. Can't happen in the SEC. You're going to lose a lot of games if you're turning the ball over more than 10 times. Auburn came into the ball game averaging 9.1 per game. Tigers surpassed that in the first half, had 13 turnovers in the first 20 minutes. And I mean, I don't want to discredit NC State for its defense here, but Auburn was just throwing the ball away. It was really just making lazy passes, threw some out of bounds, threw some directly to NC State defenders. And fortunately, it didn't turn into too much of an issue. I mean, NC State scored 22 points off of turnovers to Auburn's 11, but the big number to me was the 12 fast break points compared to Auburn's 11, because I thought that if NC State sped up the game, then that could have really caused issues for the Tigers. NC State came into this game averaging nearly 94 points per game. This was a season low in scoring for NC State. This Auburn defense is starting to look like the defenses of the past that Stephen Pearl has led. I'm really impressed by what the Tigers are doing. I think it's something like two top 10 Ken Palm offenses that Auburn has held to season lows this season. That's the kind of defense that we're used to and we've expected over the last few years with Auburn basketball under Bruce and Stephen Pearl and the rest of the staff. So I see that continuing to improve, whether it's Tahaad Pettiford's defense and his block shots, or Sebastian Williams-Adams and Filip Jovic really having that interior presence with rebounding and just rim protection. It's really good to see all of that develop. And they're forcing turnovers as well, as NC State turned it over 9 times, and that's right on pace with what they usually do, and obviously doesn't stack up to the number of 20 that Auburn had. And kind of going back to that point, it really was, and it was early. I mean, those first 4 minutes of the game, it did not look like Auburn was ready. It looked like Auburn had a week off from game action, which it was the case. And fortunately, the Tigers settled down in the second half and didn't have as many of these really poor turnovers, these really sloppy ones, because it's one thing to turn the ball over and the defense makes a great play, intercepts a pass, kind of reads a play that you didn't expect to. But again, a lot of these turnovers were self-inflicted and just lazy. So how does Auburn avoid this? Well, first of all, it goes back to that Michigan game and even the Oregon game and the games before that, and what Stephen Pearl called my turn shots. That's when some of these guys, maybe they get a rebound and try and create their own fast break, or they get the ball between the rings or on the wing and dribble the ball a few too many times, just try to dribble the air out and create their own shot. When there's an offensive set that needs to be run and the ball needs to be moved around, whatever it is, that tends to be Auburn's kryptonite, where it kind of lets the ball sit in one player's hand for too long, and they try to do too much with it, and it results in a turnover and maybe an easy bucket on the other end. So to combat that, it's as simple as Tahaad Pettiford and Cade Magwood and Kevin Overton, your three guys that have been running the point guard so far this season, commanding the offense and getting the ball and making those adjustments and making those commands key, where when they pass the ball, they know that whoever is on the receiving end of that pass is going to keep it moving and make sure that offensive set runs the way it's supposed to. And you can see the frustration throughout the night with Coach Pearl and Coach Burgomaster and the rest of that staff, and even on the floor with the players, that they understood. It took them several minutes to really get in the flow of things and make those adjustments, but second half it looked a lot cleaner. Auburn was able to find those shots and made them. That's the important thing for this team. Also, another key point here from last night: 75th consecutive sellout at Neville Arena. I will say I thought it was a little bit of a flat environment. Coach Pearl talked about that post game, about how he says they're so lucky to have a great fan base that Auburn is, because he thinks the product sucks. And that's been kind of a trend so far with Coach Pearl, is that a lot of these press conferences after wins haven't been the most enthusiastic and whatnot. That's the thing. He's a perfectionist, and he wants this team to play perfectly, and he knows what they're capable of, and they're getting there. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. And I want to see this crowd a little bit more energetic. I want to see this crowd more involved in the game when the Tigers return on December 29th against Queens, and then obviously for SEC play. It's so important. It's different now than it was 10 years ago, where 10 years ago, Auburn needed all the help it could get to win basketball games. It was the first or second year. Yeah, it was the second year of Coach Bruce Pearl's tenure, and team wasn't very good. So any help it could get, whether it's from the crowd or whatever, was always welcome. So I don't know if maybe the crowd's gotten a little complacent or just a little bit, quite frankly, has been spoiled over the last few years with all the winning that the Tigers have done. But it's still an elite environment, still one of the best in the SEC, and it is an intimidating environment. So I'm looking forward to it in SEC play. You got a while until that next home game. So you got to enjoy it when you can. Moving on to the defense, like I mentioned, holding NC State to its season low scoring output when it came in, averaging 94 points per game. So 20 points lower than what it's been averaging all season long. I just feel like it starts with the backcourt and guys like Tahaad Pettiford. And I know he has not scored at home the way that we'd liked him to, and we'll get into that momentarily. But 4 blocked shots by Tahaad in this game. It's a career high in a game. And I mean, he's truly become I don't want to say he's an interior presence, but he's become a threat when a guard is trying to drive to the basket or he pulls up from mid-range, that Tahaad's going to get his hand in their grill and he's going to make that shot difficult or block it. And that's probably been the biggest difference from his freshman year to now his sophomore year. He has 10 blocks this season. He didn't have 10 blocks all of last year. We just started December. So how does that develop? How does that continue to work into his perimeter defense? That's what I want to see continue to develop for Tahaad. But outside of that, I thought Filip Jovic looked good down low, really playing great defense, and especially on the boards. I think he might have led the team in plus minus last night. He did. He was plus 22 when he was on the floor and 24 minutes of action. Second was Overton, as you might expect. He was plus 21 with those 29 points in 37 minutes of action. But yeah, Jovic, I mean, 5 rebounds, and he just looked tough down low. He had 2 blocks as well and only turned it over 1 time. He had 3 fouls, but again, when he's out there, he's going to be physical, and he's starting to find his groove and look more comfortable out there. Is he 100% ready to take on some of the best bigs in the country? No, we saw that last week against Michigan when the Wolverines kind of had their way with Auburn. But he is absolutely going to be a key depth piece and will develop into one of those guys that's ready to be one of the key starters at some point, hopefully, for Auburn in the future. But Sebastian Williams-Adams also had a nice day defensively. And just, again, reading the box score, you don't think about it until you look at it. And holy cow, Sebastian Williams-Adams had 4 assists. It's incredible to see what that freshman is doing. And he only had 1 rebound, but I just think that he did a good job at not letting any NC State players get good shots off. And that was so good to see. Keyshawn Hall's defense seems to be, he's selective, and I like that, where he puts forth a lot more defensive effort on specific possessions and sometimes not as much. And that's part of it with a dynamic scorer like that. And then obviously Overton, Freeman, they've both been what they have been on defense and continue to grow and show that growth. Keyshawn Murphy was probably the one. So he's been sick. There's been a stomach bug and whatever illness going around with the team. If you were at the game, you might have noticed Abdul Bashir on the bench in street clothes, and that's due to an illness. And I think Murphy was suffering a little bit from that as well. And he didn't have the best run when he was out there in his 15 minutes of action. So it was important for him to get some of that rest, and Auburn was able to make do without him. But regardless, again, the defense looked the best it has kind of all year. I think this game, what my immediate reaction as soon as the game ended was that was about as frustrating as a 10-point win over a high major opponent can get, because of the 20 turnovers, because it felt like Auburn could have secured that game and really run away with it earlier. But I mean, really, what is there to complain about outside the turnovers? I don't know. What is it? Tahaad Pettiford's shooting performance? Let's go ahead and dive into that. He was 1 of 7 from the field. He was 0 for 3 from 3. He was 4 of 5 from the free throw line, and that got him to his 6-point total. My biggest gripe would be the 4 turnovers to 1 assist ratio. Can't have that. He had 3 rebounds, and then he had the 4 blocks, which were good. That was needed for him to have something positive to build off of. But again, let's dive into Tahaad Pettiford and what are these home struggles at Neville Arena? Is it as simple as he just doesn't like the look of the gym? Is it something with his eyes? And after the game, Stephen Pearl said, "I was joking with Tahaad. Do we need to put you in a hotel room, give you crappy hotel food before home games? We've got to figure out something with his routine at home, because he's as frustrated as anyone that he didn't play well offensively." And I think that's also key. He ended that with offensively. The defense is coming along. He's really starting to improve. But so far this year, when you look at the home and away splits, which Auburn hasn't, or ESPN doesn't do a great job of splitting up with the neutral sites. But I mean, it's still just wild when you look at the 6 games at home where he's 34% from the field, and on the road, he's 46.4%. And then 3-point shooting is even more of a drastic change, where he's 22.7% from 3 at home and 45.5% on the road. And we've done this before where we looked at last year's numbers, and I mean, it's just as drastic, where he shot 35.6% at home from the field, 49.2% from the field on the road, and from 3, he was 31.2% at home and 45.8% on the road. What's the difference? I don't know, because it's surely got to be a mental thing. And again, to Coach Pearl's point, is it just a routine thing? Like, is there something about getting away from home where you focus? what it reminds me of is how all football coaches and I'm guessing a lot of players just love 11 a.m. road games. They don't want to play a night game on the road. One, because of the crowd, and two, because you wake up, you get ready, and you go play ball. There's no sitting around in a hotel room and getting amped up or worrying about something else, watching other games, so on and so on. You're there on a business trip, and that's all you're doing. Is Tahaad distracted whenever he's at home and he's doing whatever throughout the day? And again, this is pure speculation, and just someone's going to get to the bottom of this on this staff. And I don't know who it'll be, but they will be praised quite a bit whenever Tahaad finds his rhythm at home inside Neville Arena. But that's the beauty of it, man. I mean, when Auburn goes to the McHale Center on Saturday to face Arizona at 9 o'clock Central Time, 7 o'clock local in Tucson, I have no doubt in my mind that Tahaad is going to be the Tigers' leader, and he is going to go out and put out an offensive performance that we've been so used to, that he had against St. John's, that he had against Oregon, that he had against the Michigans of the world last year in the Sweet 16, or whatever it was. I have no doubt that it's going to happen again on Saturday. But when Auburn comes home for the Queens game on December 29th, I don't know what's going to happen. And that's another factor I think you have to play into it. And you can't really think about that, because last year is a full sample size against several good teams at home. But, is the opponent play a factor? Is the fact that Auburn plays all of its bye games, obviously, at home, the Jackson States of the world, the Bethune-Cookmans and the Woffords and the Merrimacks and whoever, the Queens of the world. Is it an approach thing? Does he approach the game differently? Again, I don't know. I don't know if it's just something mental. I don't know if it's something with his eyes at the arena, because again, Neville Arena is a much different designed court than anywhere else, with the way the upper deck is on top of you and the students are right on the floor. And again, you go back to the Duke game last year, and he had a pretty good performance there. And another comparable arena would probably be the Pavilion in Oxford at Ole Miss. So just for the sake of this exercise, he scores 20 at Duke last year on 8 of 15 shooting. He was 4 of 8 from 3. Those were great numbers. You're going to take that, especially at Cameron Indoor Stadium. And then Auburn at Ole Miss. Okay, here's the comparable number. He scores 9 points on the road at the Rebels. He didn't play quite as many minutes. He didn't put up as many shots, but he was 3 of 7 from the field. He's 1 of 3 from 3. So maybe it is just the way things look inside the arena. Is it just in that instant at Ole Miss that he just not shoot it as much because he didn't feel comfortable? I don't know. And obviously at this point in his career, he feels like he needs to get things going offensively as the leader on this team, as the lone returnee from the Final Four team. But again, I'm not gonna let this should not creep into everyone's mind every single game, because at some point something's got to give. Something's got to give for Tahaad Pettiford, where he comes out and lights it up inside Neville Arena. I don't know what his home career high is, but if you look back, he scored 19 points in that overtime loss to Alabama last year. That's a good performance. Then you go back to the Florida game, he scored 14, but he was 4 of 11 from the field, and he was 40% against Alabama in that final game. And you keep going back, and you just don't see a ton of great performances at home for Tahaad. So yeah, I'm really interested to see how this develops, and if he can find his way out of a funk at home. Because again, like I said, as we get to Saturday, I have no doubt in my mind that Todd's going to go out and shoot the lights out at the McHale Center and make sure Auburn is in that game and everything that goes into that. So let's turn our attention to Saturday in Tucson, Arizona. Auburn's maybe its toughest challenge yet. Michigan, you could argue, is probably the best team that Auburn will play this year, just the way it performed in Las Vegas. But this being a true road game at Arizona, and I think Arizona is absolutely a Final Four national title caliber team, this is going to be a huge challenge for Auburn. Koa Pete, he's the freshman forward for the Wildcats, and he is the guy for Arizona. And Jaden Bradley, he's the name that should be familiar to Auburn fans. He transferred over from Alabama. He's the second leading scorer for the Wildcats, but there's 5 guys in double figures for Arizona, and then the 6th leading scorer is averaging 9.9 points per game. So it's all across the board. This will be I thought the test against Michigan was Auburn's interior size, and obviously it failed that test. It's not going to be the same here. It's going to be a lot of the perimeter defense, I think, that Auburn's going to have to look at and try and lock in on. And again, you're on the road against the number 2 team in the country. Can you expect to win this game? You don't go in with the expectation to win this game, because that's just letting yourself down for failure. It is difficult to win on the road in college basketball, much less against a basketball powerhouse that's Arizona and is a second-ranked team in the country. But when you look at the way this Auburn team has been playing and holding teams to season lows, Arizona averages 87.3 points per game. This season, the lowest it's scored in a game is 69 points against UCLA. Is Auburn going to hold Arizona to less than 69 at the McHale Center? Probably not. But if Auburn can hold the Wildcats to less than 80, and Tahaad Pettiford has another big game moment, and Keyshawn Hall is doing his thing, the Tigers are going to be right in it. That's the whole thing. And while that sounds simple and straightforward, again, it's hard to deny the factor that is Tahaad Pettiford and Keyshawn Hall when they're in a groove, and if this defense continues to improve. And I really want to see it on the perimeter. I don't want to see Jaden Bradley dishing out assists left and right, or improving upon his 55.6% three-point percentage. That's the thing. He's got to they've got to be pushed off the three-point line, and they can't be playmaking. So I'm excited for the challenge. I'm excited for Auburn to really potentially make a statement, or it's going to be a game that maybe not another wake-up call, because you had that against Michigan. That's the thing. This needs to be another game where Auburn goes out and shows that it is able to compete with the best. You go, and here's another topic of conversation. Joe Lunardi released, I don't know if it's his first bracketology update of the season, but it's one of the first, and it's December. So let's talk about it a little bit, because he has Auburn as the last number 5 seed in the country. I think that's I don't think many bracketologists or anyone making a bracket right now seeding out teams would have Auburn as a top 5 seed. I think Auburn probably would be sitting at a 6 or 7 on most folks' brackets, and that's why the Tigers are the last 5 seed. They're right behind St. John's, who Auburn obviously beat. So this is a chance to really go out west and prove itself if you're Auburn. Arizona is right now the 4 seed, according to Joe Lunardi. Michigan's the number 1 overall seed, Purdue's number 2. And then you have, I'm guessing Houston is number 7, because he has Duke listed twice at 3 and 7, but I don't see Houston listed. So yeah, I would imagine Houston is his 7 seed. So, I mean, Auburn, once again, challenging itself with the non-conference schedule, and that's only going to benefit it when it gets to the SEC and it gets to Selection Sunday, because Auburn has marquee wins now against St. John's and against Oregon, against NC State. And I don't think Oregon and NC State are about to be these Big Ten or ACC contenders necessarily. NC State could be. I'm not gonna doubt them too much yet. I still just think Duke and North Carolina and Louisville are a step above them at this point, where they're going to be just on that next tier. So we'll see how that develops and whatnot. But that St. John's win is going to be one that carries into the postseason seeding conversation. So another opportunity on Saturday to really add a marquee win to the resume for Auburn. And we'll break it down on Sunday about how that game goes and Does big game Tahaad return? Does Keyshawn Hall have another explosive game and put himself, right there in the player of the year conversation, whether that's in the SEC or in the national conversation? We'll see. Depends on how that performance goes on Saturday. And can Kevin Overton back up his career night in Neville Arena? Who's going to step up on the defensive end? I thought it was interesting that Tahaad Pettiford and Filip Jovic were the guys against NC State. Is it them again against Arizona, against Koa Pete and Jaden Bradley? We will see. I like Auburn, not necessarily to win this game, but I think they're going to go in and really show what they're made of, similar to the Houston game. It's going to be a back and forth game is my feeling with this game. And again, a tough road environment, a real road environment. That's what I'm excited to see from this Auburn ball club. Thank you for tuning into this edition of the Barn Hoops podcast. Be sure you're subscribed and, tuned in to all of the content we've got going on here on the Barn Podcast Network, because like I said, Auburn football, Alex Golesh has been introduced and is fully into his first week as the head coach of Auburn football. Early signing day was yesterday. That it's concluded. There's still some hanging nails out there that need to be tightened up. But Auburn will learn its football dates, its schedule for next year, next week. And then Auburn basketball, again, continues on the road. And next week is final weeks for Auburn. So there will be some time off between that Arizona game and the Chattanooga game and holiday Hoopsgiving. So is that much needed? We'll talk about it on Sunday when we recap the Arizona game. So make sure you subscribe, hit the like button, whether it's on YouTube or your podcast platform of choice. And we'll talk to you next time on the Barn Hoops podcast.